In this video, we're going to look at the little Ivies, what they are, the pros and cons, and the differences between them. So what are the little Ivies? The little Ivies is an unofficial designation for about 15 or so small, prestigious, private liberal arts colleges located in the Northeast. If you look at the rankings for these schools, and this comes from U.S. News and World Report for 2024, I've put on this chart not only how they're ranked, but also the acceptance rate for first-year applicants. You can see that a lot of these schools, particularly top schools like Williams, Amherst, Swarthmore, they have about a 6 or 7% acceptance rate, which makes them extremely difficult to get into, comparable to many of the Ivy League schools, maybe a little bit easier. This next chart, I feel, though, is perhaps the most important graphic in this whole presentation, which compares the regular decision acceptance rate in green with the early decision acceptance rate in red. And you can see here that across the board, it's far easier to get into all of these schools if you apply as an early decision applicant. What are the pros of attending one of these schools? The first pro is a focus on undergraduate teaching. So at these small liberal arts colleges, they attract professors specifically because they're really good at teaching and because they want to teach. And you compare this with large universities where they attract professors either because they're leaders in their field or because they're doing exciting research. But that doesn't necessarily make you a good teacher, and that doesn't necessarily make you want to be a good teacher. So at universities, the quality of teaching can be hit or miss, but at these smaller liberal arts colleges, the quality of teaching is consistently strong. A second pro is that you have access to everything. So at a large university, you're constantly competing against hundreds of students to do anything you want. But at these smaller schools, everything is basically just handed to you. So you have a small class size of about 15 or 20 students instead of a lecture hall of about 200 students. So that not only means that you have like a better discussion-based education, but you have access to your professors. You have much easier access to research opportunities. You have access to clubs on campus. They're not as competitive. You have better access to housing on campus, to parking spaces. Across the board, anything you want to do, you're the priority. The third pro is that they have beautiful campuses. So if you're looking for a safe, idyllic, rural college campus that looks like something out of a movie, these are the colleges for you. And again, you compare this with universities, which are usually overrun and overcrowded and have too many buildings and are constantly under construction. These colleges are a beautiful place to go to school. And a fourth pro is that you have a much better chance to play a varsity sport. And for a lot of students, that's a big part of their college experience. So the little Ivies are Division III, whereas most universities in the Ivy League are Division I. Division I attracts elite athletes. And unless you're that high caliber, you're not getting anywhere near that field. What are some of the cons of the little Ivies? Well, the first con is that they have less name recognition. So even if you go to an elite university like Williams or Amherst or Swarthmore, in life you will encounter a lot of people who have never heard of that school. Now the good news is that the people who matter, which means graduate schools and corporate recruiters, they all know the caliber of your school, so you don't have to worry. But outside of that, a lot of people will not be as familiar. But one thing to note is that if you plan on going to graduate school, the name value of your graduate school is going to be far more important than where you went to undergrad. So you can easily spend your undergrad years at a lesser known little Ivy and then go to a big name school for graduate school, and you kind of get the best of both worlds. A second con is that you have fewer choices. At a large university, you have endless options for everything. You may have 100 majors to choose from, but at a little Ivy, you may only have 35 majors to choose from. At a large university, you may have 3,000 courses to choose from, but at a little Ivy, you may only have 500. So the quality is there, there's just less quantity. And a third con is that it could be a little bit claustrophobic. So these schools generally have between 1,500 and 2,000 students total. You compare that with maybe an Ivy League school where there's 7,000 undergraduates plus double that in graduate students. And the small size means that it can feel a lot like a high school. You'll see the same students again and again. Everyone will kind of know your business after a while. So if you're looking to go to a school where you're endlessly meeting new people, or you can kind of preserve some of your anonymity, a university is probably better for you. Let's look at some of the key differences, Williams versus Amherst. These schools are very similar. They're both located in remote areas of Massachusetts. They're both extremely prestigious, both very difficult to get into, but there are some differences. Historically, Amherst has been known for being a bit more intellectual, a bit more diverse, and a bit more focused on graduate school, students who want to get their PhD or go to law school or med school. Whereas Williams has a reputation for being a bit preppier, a bit more pre-professional, and having students who specifically want to go into business. Another difference is that Williams is more remote. There's really nothing around the campus, whereas Amherst is part of a 5-college consortium. So when you go to Amherst, you can take classes at any of these other schools in the area, and they have a shuttle bus between them. And Amherst also shares a town with UMass Amherst. So the town just has like a much bigger feel to it. And one other difference is that Amherst has an open curriculum, so you can pretty much take whatever courses you want. Swarthmore versus Haverford. These two schools are located about a half an hour apart from each other in Pennsylvania, and they're both about 30 minutes by train to Philadelphia. They both tend to attract an intellectual, kind of nerdy, quirky student body. They're both rigorous academically, but Swarthmore definitely has a reputation for being more rigorous, more cutthroat, more competitive, whereas Haverford is definitely more collaborative. And Haverford has this unique honor system where students are allowed to proctor their own exams, so they can take their exams home and do it in their dorms and just do it by the honor system. It's also important to know that both of these schools are part of a tri-college consortium with Bryn Mawr, which is another private liberal arts college. It's all women's. It's located in the same area. So students can take classes at each, they could take classes at the different schools and also join different clubs. And also students from all three of these colleges can take classes at UPenn. Colgate versus Hamilton. These two schools are located close to each other in upstate New York, and they also have a lot in common. They're both predominantly upper middle class white, with about 65 to 70% fitting that demographic. They're both very athletic. They're both really remote. But there are some key differences. Colgate is actually a Division I college, not a Division III college. So it's very much more like a small university. It actually has 3,000 students, and it's kind of a work hard, party hard campus. There's a big Greek life. There's a big sports scene. Whereas Hamilton has that element to it. It is very athletic, but there's a whole separate side to campus, which is just the opposite. It's very kind of nerdy and artsy and intellectual. So Hamilton has kind of like something for everyone, whereas Colgate is more like a conventional big university, but on a small campus. Vassar versus Wesleyan. Both these schools attract a similar type of student body. They attract students who are ultra-liberal, artsy, intellectual, LGBTQ friendly, a little weird maybe. These are the type of students who typically also apply to schools like Yale and Brown. It's that similar type of feel. The difference is that Wesleyan is not in the greatest town, and Vassar has a much nicer campus. And also Vassar used to be all women, so it definitely skews a bit female. And also Vassar has no Greek life and has no core curriculum. And finally, Bowdoin, Bates, and Colby. All three of these schools are within an hour of each other in Maine, and they probably have far more in common than they have differences. But some of the differences are that Bowdoin is arguably the most prestigious of the three, the most rigorous of the three. It probably has the nicest town. It's closer to the coast. It's closer to Boston. Bates has more of a reputation for being laid back and artsy. And Colby has more of a reputation for being the most remote of the three, although they're all remote, but also maybe the most outdoorsy, the most sporty, but that's probably splitting hairs. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any direct questions for me, you can always email me. I'll put my contact information in the video notes.